Hello, my name is Mark Fell, and I am someone who struggles to define clearly what it is that I am. But I guess the simplest way is to say artist and sort of increasingly writer living in the north of England in a town called Rotherham.
I'm Emily Nam. We are art people.
I mean, music fundamentally is a collective activity. It's like, why do we have music? Why do humans have music? And it's because it's about group bonding and and connection. That's what the function of music is, I think. Like I was reading some neuroscience paper the other day talking about neural synchrony, and if you make music collectively with people, you have this enhanced neural synchrony. I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know, but it was basically like the gist of it was participating in music together builds empathy and builds connections, and of course it does because that's what we can see that.
Mark Fell is a multidisciplinary artist and writer. His computational electronic compositions draw on both a compelling, minimal aesthetic and complex algorithmic and mathematical structures. His body of work includes electronic compositions and performance, sound installation, critical writing, educational systems, and curatorial projects. He has worked closely with Rian Treanor and most recently developed a collaborative open source web-based program, Intersymmetric. He's one part of SND with Matt Steele naming their project after the extension often used for computer sound. Other collaborators have included Yasunao Tone, Laurie Spiegel, Okkyung Lee, Will Guthrie, Ernest Emmons, and Carl Michael von Hausswolff. Mark has released work on labels including Line, Editions Mego, and Rasternotten. In public space, Mark has presented work at international institutions including the Institute of Contemporary Art, the Serpentine, Victoria and Albert Museum, and Whitechapel Gallery in London, the Australian Centre for Moving Image in Melbourne, Artispace, MoMA, and Issue Project Room in New York City, and in 2017 he was the curator of The Geometry of Now at VAC Foundation in Moscow. Structure and Synthesis, The Anatomy of Practice was published in 2022, charting Mark's unorthodox thinking on time, structure, and technology. Mark's interest in the diversity of cultures and philosophical theories is reflected in a story he shares of his necessary journeys of walking through and atop the hills of northern England. Our conversation exemplifies his role and reflections of the socio-political implications that he has found himself embedded, and how these experiences have contributed to the making of work. His practice is expansive and in response to the human condition, looking for possibilities that can reveal new insights and procedures for participating with digital systems. Hi, Mark. It's really great to have a conversation with you today. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So, I just wanted to go into a bit of your earlier life. You're currently living in
Rotherham.
Rotherham, which is in northern
So
England.
Rotherham is a small town on the outskirts of Sheffield. Um, I kind of grew up between Sheffield and Rotherham. My dad's family's from Sheffield, but they just then, when he grew up and got a job, he bought a house in Rotherham. So that's where I grew up. It's kind of it's it's. I mean, I don't know if you've been following British news recently, but Rotherham's often mentioned because of um, there was. It's historically, it's a bit of a kind of it's an interesting place because of a few sort of moments in political and social history. So, like in the early 1980s, there was a famous conflict in Rotherham in a town called Orgreave, a village called Orgreave, between striking miners and police. This is in the days of Margaret Thatcher, so it's kind of known for this thing, the Battle of Orgreave, which is like a pivotal confrontation between unions and police. And then more recently, in 2003, there was it's actually been in the news recently because Elon Musk's been tweeting about it. There was like a scandal with child sexual exploitation gangs operating in the town, um, and so that's something quite, yeah. It's kind of like a legacy that we're dealing with, and then also more recently, still, like I think late last year, there was a riot around a hotel where asylum seekers were housed, where a bunch of right wing extremists tried to burn down a hotel
Wow.
that contained um, refugees. So Rotherham's often kind of used in as a sort of like um, point of reference in wider national debates about um, the pros and cons of um, living in multicultural societies. So I'm stuck in the middle of that, basically.
Has it been that way for a long time, or was that early on? Has it always had that position, or it's changed during your lifetime? That
It's changed because early on it was when mining communities. So the vast majority, it seemed like the vast majority of work in this region was either steelworks or mining, and the communities that kind of worked in those industries were very close knit, typically white working class people, and that in the mid 1980s kind of fell apart with the Thatcherite agenda of privatizing and stripping assets out of public services and stuff. So it kind of had quite a devastating effect on the economic and also kind of social well-being of the town. Um, and then so you get a lot of very disenfranchised, very alienated people, of which I was one when I was a young person. And then into that, you get this report. I think this report came out in 2012 or 13ish, which basically revealed that there'd been an ongoing um, problem with gangs, typically um, who were identified as Muslim gangs of Pakistani heritage, who were basically exploiting children, like having, raping kids. And so that actually happened in the specific community that we lived in back then. It was part of um, some. I have a son, Rian Treanor, you might have heard of. He's an artist like me, and so it was actually Ryan's extended friendship groups that were like the victims of the. So we were very close to it. Basically, we know personally the people that are now, like now they're kind of 30 something women who've survived that, and also we lived within the Muslim communities. Like the area we lived in was predominantly uh, Pakistani heritage families who were practicing Muslims. So we were kind of in the middle of all that, and but as someone who's brought up to be like anti-racist, um, it's not like I mean, if we want to get into this, it's a long story, but we can go there if you want.
sure. I
Basically,
mean, if you've got time.
yeah, what happened was, so I was, like my parents basically brought me up to be anti-racist. So to call out racism, not to tolerate it, stuff like that. Um, and um, so when this all happened, when the report came out, and it's like, um, I had a lot of questions like, what's going on here? So actually, having lived in Muslim communities and known a lot of Muslim families in a really close friends, what that prompted me to do was actually learn about Islam. So I'm an atheist. I'm not a Muslim, but I studied Islamic philosophy. I read the Quran. I did a lot of thinking, and and it's clear to me. So the basic narrative from right wing groups in Britain is that um, this is a problem with Islam. That there are kind of barbaric and regressive attitudes towards women in Muslim community, and at the heart of the Islamic religion, there's this toxicity. And controversially, I actually think the opposite. Having studied Islam and the Quran, it's clear to me that it was an early attempt to be a feminist um, ideology, but that ideology was progressively misinterpreted um, by toxic guys. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
So actually, like a lot of the friends I have who are Muslims, and a lot of Muslim families that I know, they really value educating their daughters. You know, they it's not about holding girls back. Yet there is obviously the Taliban, for example, in Afghanistan, are doing barbaric things to like women's education and stuff like that. So for me, it seems like what it is to be a Muslim has been hijacked by both the Islamic extremists and the like far right extremists, and the people in the middle who are just like regular, you know, uh, regular followers of that religion, um, don't have those views at all. So it's a really it, there's a lot of complex things going on in the town, basically,
Mm.
and a lot of it primarily is to do with poverty and lack of opportunity and um, social deprivation. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
It's a kind of toxic blend. But for me, the 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 belief that the town's problems sort of stem from having a large Muslim population is a complete mistake, basically.
And I think the things that are communicated outside are the extreme behaviors.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
that represents
exactly.
the point of view of what.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the media reports kind of like just add to the hysteria around everything. You know, there's no kind of clear analysis or like um, no criticality to how it's covered. I think, um, but equally, like the people who did so the riot that happened around the hotel where these asylum seekers were housed. It's probably like 4 or 5 months ago now, and it actually sparked then a series of sort of like it was part of a series of riots around Britain. So that Sunday morning of that riot, like I didn't go. Normally I go to be on the anti, you know, to be a voice from how can I put it? I'm normally opposing the right wing, basically. So we'd
Mhm.
normally be there with it's usually some nerdy kind of we were like no no, and my partner went, and I was like, don't go. It's just gonna be this is gonna be carnage. Just stay away. Let the police do the job. But she's like, I can't not go. I've got to go.
Mm.
So she went basically and stood. I think there's about 50, um, maybe 75 um, anti-fascists. Let's call them anti-fascists. There was about a small number of anti-fascists circling the hotel who were basically got totally outnumbered by about I don't know, maybe something like 1,000
Wow.
um, right-wing protesters who then start to just trash everything, and so basically the police had to rush them to a place of safety. They managed to get the small anti-fascist group to the police station, and then uh, it was just absolute carnage. But I think one thing that that day actually changed me in one respect, that previously I'd been, you see these kind of far right kind of protesters on national television, and you kind of laugh at like their lack of understanding. Do you know what I mean? And they become a figure. They become sort of like a a group that you can ridicule because they're like, they're obviously like not very well educated. A lot, the prejudice is that they're not very well educated. And then that day at Manvers, it actually changed me because I thought I can't laugh at these people anymore. Do you know what I mean? If we're going to get beyond this, we have to listen to their concerns, because a lot of it was local people. Do you know what I mean? It was a lot of uh, basically white people from that area who just had enough with the way life was. It's almost like, it's just unbearably difficult to have a decent existence in Britain. So that point at the moment of those riots, I think it changed the kind of how we,
Not so much an
how we
us
deal
and
with that.
them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was more like we need to just start talking, because we can't just keep ridiculing and shouting Nazi scum off
Violence
our
and
street.
yeah.
Because it's there. They actually live there. You know what I mean? And and we've got to listen to the concerns. And I'm as someone from a white working class background, I need to be aware that we're kind of, in theory, we're meant to be on the same side. You know, so yeah, it's a complex. Rotherham's a complex place, um, and yeah, it's just, but yeah, it just keeps getting dragged into these wider narratives. And then Elon
Mm.
Musk was bloody tweeting about it, and just completely ignorant of the reality of what's going on. And it needs to be said, all the vast majority of like people who committed those crimes against those young girls, um, a lot of them were from like of Pakistani heritage, but they weren't devout Muslims. They were like petty criminals. They were
Mm.
gangsters. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They were like bastards. They're not. They're not. These weren't pillars of society. These were like scummy people who would just take advantage of anyone. Not at all like the kind of respectable Muslim families that live in the town.
Yeah,
And
and it impacts everyone
yeah,
just because of.
yeah, yeah. So it was, yeah, it was. I didn't anticipate ended up talking about this right now.
No, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important. I think as well as cultures moving around the world and global interactions of different cultures meeting each other and creating space for each other
Hmm.
and
Yeah,
finding
yeah,
that common human connection.
yeah. I mean, the other thing about the government, so the previous government, the Conservative Party, who aren't in power anymore in Britain, their policy, so they took in terms of where refugees are housed, it used to be decided by the local governments, and then the national government took that power away from them. So rather than just like sensitively like placing, you know, these newcomers in the right parts of town or whatever, you get the Conservative Party literally taking over a hotel in a poor white area and putting a bunch of migrants in that hotel with no other resources around there. And it's a deliberate act of provocation. It's deliberately designed to cause tensions so that the people and families living around those areas are more likely to support the government's policy at that time, which was to move people out to Rwanda. So it was a clear it was just it was just game playing that sort of erupted, I think.
And then it affects everybody.
Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
makes a massive mess.
How did
And
this kind of social climate, I was curious at how that impacted you even at an earlier age and forming ideas and ways of approaching the world? And has that been a pillar in a way of how you've approached your work from these tensions and from these conflicts? Has it always been? Because I feel a lot of your work is about interruption and maybe
Yeah,
thinking
well,
about things on the edge.
yeah, well, actually, like I kind of discovered electronic music and synthesizers at the moment that around, like 82-ish, 83-ish, which was the time at which, I was growing up. I wasn't a kid anymore, and I was learning about, you know, the brutality of the government that were of the time. And so I kind of like retreated into this sort of safe space of electronic music, and 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 music for me was always a kind of, it provided an alternative world to the kind of cruel political landscape that existed outside. Um, and at that time, my dad lost his job, and it was, we had financial difficulties as a family, not really bad, but um, and then um, I basically became a dropout. I would have identified as an anarchist and just living on the periphery of society, and music was a part of that, um, as well as like literature and philosophy and film and stuff, and making making art. Um, and actually, it seems now to have come full circle that like my practice in the past 4 or 5 years has become much more focused on what's going on in the town and how to actively engage in that, and also what I can do to help younger people in the town. So me and Ryan do lots of like um, projects with music where we're getting kids from like quite challenging backgrounds, just to give them alternatives, just to give them doorways into new experiences. So I think it's, for a long time, music making for me, although I was like felt politically active and politically engaged, music making for me was quite disconnected from that. As a professional artist and working in that industry for a long time, I was making records, and yeah, this is great. I'm traveling around and da da da, but there was no real political sort of bite to it. But I think now it seems to have really come, like I said, full circle to a point where I'm not the isolated kid in the bedroom with the synthesizer.
Mm.
But I'm speaking to those people in my town, and yeah, yeah, So it's, I think the function of music as well to, in those kinds of challenging times, can be quite a powerful one.
Did you, so in a way, you use music to have as a form of escapism?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It was like, back
Es-
then. It was like, yeah, I don't want to engage with the world. Like, I don't have any friends who I feel like I have anything in common with. Um, I'll sit in my room forever, twiddling my synthesizer, reading books about philosophy. It wasn't until I was like sort of, um, I made kind of, I had friendship groups, but it was kind of like, like some kind of older hippies or some anarchists or, some lefties or some weird dropouts or whatever. And it was like, well, this is about as good as it gets. But it wasn't until I got to university in Sheffield. So I studied experimental film and video at what was then called a polytechnic. So Britain back in the 80s had polytechnics, which were, if you wanted to study like fine art or media studies, that's where you went, because they were kind of really radical, really switched on places. So I was lucky enough to go to this really great art school, and it was like such a brilliant experience of just meeting so many fellow kind of outsiders, Um, and then and it was great as well because by this time we're talking like the sort of like 87, 88, house and techno was emerging in Britain. And I mean, obviously house music arrived in Britain a lot earlier, but as a kind of more of a generalized sort of like social phenomena, it didn't really gain momentum in Britain until like I'd say 87, 88. And then in 89, uh, Wart Records started in Sheffield. Um,
Oh, that started
so
in Sheffield.
yeah, yeah. So that was I think yeah, the first release was 89. Yeah. So there was a lot of kind of there was a lot of sort of connections with this art school that I was at, and the party scene and the house, the club music scene. Um, so it was a good place to be back then. Um,
At what point did music then become this sort of, I guess I'm thinking like a cloud of going into that, but then deciding that there was something really interesting within the sound space? Like, was that when you were studying film? Did you start to discover these units or particles of sound? Or
well, I think it actually happened the first time I used a synthesizer. So it's a really funny story, but it was. I was probably like 13 or something, and I went. It was one Christmas, and we went to my dad's relatives in Sheffield. So they lived in the east end of Sheffield, in these really tiny kind of terraced houses where you'd have, there was still outside toilets then, and they'd have like a coal shed where the coal was kept. And my older cousin, had a synthesizer in the coal shed. So it sounds like such a working class cliche. And someone said, "Oh, go and have a go. Use this synthesizer. Go into the coal shed, and because I was like totally bored at this family get together. Go and use this synthesizer." And it was like literally the moment my fingers touched the filter cut off dial, and I went like, "Eow." It was just like like a light switched on, and it's like whoa, like just the sensation of turning this dial and going like, it's just, even now, when you get your hand on the cut off of a synthesizer, it's just so massively engaging. I don't know why. So I kind of at that point got really into synthesizers and managed to get one. Like my parents' next door neighbor was a technician at the university, so he'd got a synthesizer. He's some like science electronics nerd. So I borrowed this synthesizer off him, and then like all through the 80s I was just like completely fixated with synthesizers. So I kind of always, yeah, always been into synthesizers from that point on. um
and that was because you didn't study music. That was in a way your training, sound
yeah,
training
I
just
didn't study music, and I'm really pleased that I didn't study
mm.
music. So I just want to say I'm really in favor of music education, but I think music education should be far more pluralistic in what it teaches. And far too often, in my opinion, it's it reduce music education is reduced to like, let's learn how to do this, and um, write music and read music and play this instrument following this score and make it perfect. And and that's a great thing, but it shouldn't be the only thing. And until recently, I was on the local music education hub, so it was like we were in charge of music education in the town. Not in charge of it, but we kind of like, it was a charity that was involved in all the local schools and the music teaching. And I think actually most of the teachers were really in favor of like widening the curriculum, but just didn't have the means to do it, because of economic pressures and the practicalities of stuff. So yeah, people often think I'm anti music education. I'm not. I'm really, music education should be a part of every kid's life, but it should be like really, it shouldn't just be this shoebox, this one size fits all sort of thing. But personally speaking, I'm glad that I never learned to read and write music, and I never learned to play an instrument. And and the kind of sort of foundations of my musical sort of cognitive framework is very much derived from a synthesizer and drum machine. And really now that's kind of like at the heart of what I do. It's still that sort of basic um, systematized approach. So yeah, I never studied music,
And do you
but I
think
guess
not studying it gave you that freedom to think about possibilities and not necessarily even think about it as music, but as systems?
yeah, I think it just suited me. It
Yeah.
suited me, and I'd go into the synthesizer shop in Sheffield to look at synthesizers I could never afford, and there was always some guy there who's like playing some elaborate kind of, and you just think like you're playing. Why are you playing all these notes? Do you know what I mean? You can just twiddle the knobs, and it was like it used to make me really angry. Do you know what I mean? That it's like it's all this kind of it seemed to be missing the point. It's like, why are you doing that on a synthesizer? Obviously, is what this is me as a little kid thinking, not
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Um, and so I was quite a angry and oppositional young person, and music was always a way of articulating that oppositionality and that kind of anger and refusal to um to conform, I guess. Uh, um,
And I
so
think I
yeah,
can see that through the work that you do. It's like that social development or point of view exists through everything that you make, that it's given you the opportunity to create new possibilities of how to engage with your work.
yeah. I mean,
Not in a reactive, rebellious way, but in a really kind of focused.
yeah, yeah. I think so. Yeah, and also that's probably not something that's special to me either. It's probably
Mm,
something that a lot.
mm,
But I think l- looking back these days, I mean, it's kind of quite weird for me because like the music I tend to listen to these days is not electronic music. It's quite traditional music. So I listen to a lot of Indian classical music. I listen to a lot of Persian music. I listen to a lot of jazz. I listen to a lot of um, classical music, even not the kind of romantic stuff, but the more kind of weird end of classical music and contemporary classical music. So I'm actually like, in reality, I'm actually quite a traditionalist. Like I'm not someone who's like rebellious and rude or like
mm.
like traditions really matter to me. I think, and I think that you can only kind of. I mean, it's not like I'm nostalgic and I want to just kind of like keep things in a certain state, but I think you really need to understand a tradition in order to operate within it and and contribute to it. Um, if that makes sense.
No, it does. Do you was your aesthetic and your interest at the time, you were interested in computer music and you wanted it to sound a certain way, or do you feel it was always about generating sound and the tools and the technical aspect of generating sound, and whatever the um, obviously had a minimal appreciation for
Hmm.
the nuances of the changing dials and things, but
Yeah,
what was your
like
relationship?
yeah, but when you say computer music, I think we should make a distinction between
Election.
sort of like yeah, like
Yeah.
the kind of like computer music tradition that was like that present in the research institutes around the world. Um, so like IRCAM or GRM or Bell Labs or at Stanford or all these pioneering projects but that was a different world. That world somehow might have infiltrated into mine, but I wasn't directly aware of it. So the musical kind of traditions that I was primarily coming out of as a young person, first of all, was synth pop. So
Mm-hmm.
things like Depeche Mode, the Human League, Soft Cell, and then as I, by the age of sort of 14, 15, I'd kind of learned about where the more kind of weird roots of that music were, things like Throbbing Gristle and that and stuff like that. So I kind of went backwards into this world of like weird industrial stuff. Um, I can't remember what your question was.
Well, it was the difference of an aesthetic. There's this sort of genre and wanting it to sound a certain way. And were you trying to make sounds that sounded in a way that you wanted, or were you more interested in the mechanics and the technical generation of sound?
I think it's it's a tricky one to answer because that dichotomy exists in how we understand and describe things, but I don't think that dichotomy exists in practice. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like while I'm there twiddling the knobs on the synthesizer, I'm not thinking, am I trying to make a great sound or am I trying, I'm just
Mm.
engaged in. So I think at one point, if you'd asked me that question, I would have spent hours trying to think of an answer. But now I think actually the dichotomy doesn't doesn't make sense to me. It's like I often used to get asked because when I first established a professional career, and I'd be making what was essentially very simplified techno music that wasn't very good in clubs. And people would be like, "What are you interested in? Are you interested in the process or the outcome?" And I'd be like, "Oh God, how do I answer this question?" And and actually, that distinction for me now doesn't exist. It's like I'm interested in an activity that can't be chopped up in that way, if you see what I mean.
There definitely,
And
though, is a practice and a being very intimate with the process of um, making in hands. That
yeah,
that is part. You're not just sort of in your head going, "I want to make this great album and it's going to sound like this." Everything is about you being in the moment, very attuned to
it's it's
and responsive, I guess.
yeah, but it's not just one thing or the other. It's
No, I agree.
sometimes I
Yeah.
do think I want to make this great album. I
Okay.
want it to
Yeah.
sound like da 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 da. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Oh crikey! I heard this great track the other day. I want to make something, and I know when I start making it, it won't turn out like that because I'm not very good at copying things. But the thing is, we can. It's not one thing or the other. It's not like I'm interested in the process. I'm interested in the technologies. I'm interested in like the aesthetic history, or I want to make this, or I want to do that. It's like we can jump in and out of all those descriptions and ways of understanding what we do because they're all kind of useful. But what we do isn't rooted in any one description. Do you see what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah. No, I think it's complicated and it's very nuanced how you approach it. I also, from my point of view of trying to understand your work, there's also a lot of generative open-ended outcomes that can arise in a way. You're using maybe more now, you're inputting into systems
Yeah.
a certain
I
way
mean,
of working, and so you don't have control over the outcome.
yeah, but one thing that I think has changed about my work in terms of my personal priorities is that so I'm just going to completely contradict what I just said.
Yeah.
When I started out, it's like I want to make a great album. Do you know what I mean? I'm
Hmm.
an artist who makes albums in the tradition of like, albums and what the form of the album is and how things and what it is that makes an album great, and that's what I want to do. I want to make
Hmm.
records, and I don't want to do performances. I don't want to write software. But these days, it's like I, I've done so much performance, especially collaborative performance and all kinds of stuff, that it seems reductive to put that on record. That it's like um, the record is basically a collection of decisions, and the music I make is basically a collection of possibilities. So
Mhm.
it's like um, somehow now I've lost that sense of um, the album being the kind of ultimate outcome of the practice, because it's just this it's just all it is now is just a documentation of a particular set of parameters or something. But so it's and so I've not released a solo electronic album for like over 10 years, because it's like, how do I squash this stuff into that form now? It's like
Mm.
it's something else now. And it would be like the guy in the synthesizer shop playing Led Zeppelin on like a DX7. Like, why am I squashing my practice? Why am I using this and turning it into, it's like there's a mismatch there. Um, so yeah, uh,
How is technology? Because I think the synthesizers were this exciting new technology and creation. And since that time, you've seen a huge shift in technology and development of even just talking about the record. And now you can film something and you can have a really great
mhm.
documentation in that way. And so, have you kind of
So
always embraced the change and what it can do?
I mean, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Like I guess I'm kind of stuck somewhere now, because I work with new technologies and emergent technologies, but actually the things that the questions that are central to my practice, they're not really rooted in like, what is AI going to do, or so like throughout my kind of career, I guess, like from those early like experiments with analog synthesis, and then getting a what did I get? A TX81Z FM synthesizer. So moving through different kinds of synthesis, and then ultimately around 1997 getting Max MSP. Um, I was like, encountering a lot of new things, and basically trying to look for the thing that was the that made sense to me, that basically made making music enjoyable. is what I was looking for. And it's when I encountered it, really the sort of penny dropped when I got Max MSP. It's like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, okay, so this is where I'm at now. So I think, I mean, in terms of like, I think it would be sort of a bit narcissistic of me to claim that I'm someone who's continually looking at new technologies and techniques and integrating them into my practice, because I'm not really that. Like for example, my approach to Max MSP. It's gone through several iterations since the late '90s, and in many ways, the way I use Max MSP is still based on the way it was then. You
Mm.
know, and a lot of the new things that about it, like for example, on at some point, probably like 10 years ago, they had a toolbar around the edge with a power switch on the bottom, so you could start to render the DSP. Start to make sound by just pressing the power switch in the bottom right hand corner. And I just refused to use. I never use that button. I'd rather just build an object that like starts the DSP and spend a few minutes. And so it's kind of like a bit of a sort of old timer kind of
Mm.
mentality that I've got. So and it still just seems really wrong that there's this button in the corner that starts and stops things. But everyone uses it now, but I don't. Um, But I am in touch with new technologies, but I'm not really. My agenda isn't what is happening and like how can I use it, but it just I guess a lot of my concerns just run alongside that.
Mm.
Um, so I'm really interested in like how we understand the role of technology in creative practice and how and the kind of boundaries that we draw, the kind of conceptual map of what creative practice is and the role of technology and how it's how it's invented and given a role, because in reality, if you there really is no distinction between technology and creativity if you just look at what people do. But yet, for many years, I was like, well, what is this relationship between the thing called technology and this thing called creativity? Well, there isn't a relationship because there isn't a separation, really. Like for me, the technical environment is the cognitive environment. It's as simple as that. It's like, um, so yeah, I think
So,
yeah, go
what are
on.
your tools in a way? So it's like you've talked about finding these tools that were the sweet spot for you and that made sense. And really, for some people, that might not even exist yet. And so when Max MSP came in, it
Yeah,
gave you that opportunity that you weren't even aware it existed. Or it's like finding the synth in the coal shed.
yeah, yeah. I mean, what happened was, so computers at that time started to become powerful enough that you could actually do real time synthesis on computers. And I'd heard about this bit of software called Generator and this company, Native Instruments. So now Native Instruments is a big company
Mm.
and they make, and what is now called Reactor was originally called Generator. So I got in touch with Native Instruments. I was working as a technician in a university art school, um, and I said, "Look, I'm running the sound studios. Can I have a copy of Generator just to check it out?" And they sent me a copy, and that really was the first time that I was able to do like really explore things that you couldn't do in a physical way because you don't have enough modules or patch leads or whatever. So Generate was the first thing I used. And then probably like a year later, I got Max, and then Max then became Max MSP with the audio extensions. Um, but in terms of the tools that I have, there is that. But then there are also like techniques that I've adopted in relationship to those tools. Like I know that this does this. Um, I know how to join the. If you said to a woodworker like, "How do you put a shelf up?" They have like hammers and nails and all this kind of stuff, but they also have the knowledge of how shelves go up. And it's kind of like that's a set of tools as well. And then, and also there's like a bunch of philosophical tools or discursive tools that are kind of quite useful. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't say that tools are just the the things that we, like the hammer in the toolbox. There's
I think it gives you the possibility, though, to then develop these other ways of thinking and skills. But
yeah,
you do need that primary infrastructure to be able to build on that and build and think differently and maybe approaching this system in one way, but then another system might have generated a different way of thinking, like philosophically,
yeah,
about
yeah,
how, and for whatever reason, that was what you made sense to you and
yeah. I guess so. Yeah,
caught your attention. Or
yeah. Yeah, I mean, also it was just really good fun.
Mm.
To me, using Max MSP was like the best video game ever. I don't have to play Mario or Zelda ever again. I can just sit up all night doing Max patches, and it's a similar kind of uh, feeling, I think. Um, so yeah, it just felt right to me, and it just it just it's not like it gave me lots of answers to questions. It just gave me lots more questions. It's
Hmm.
like, what about this? What if I do that? What? Oh wow! What about that? So suddenly, it it meant that I could explore in a way that never been possible before to me.
Are you an inquisitive person? So you are driven by asking a lot of questions and problem solving and.
Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely like yeah. I mean, I will. Yeah, that's me basically.
Yeah.
I'll literally stay up all night just using Macs because I'm like, not so much these days, but there was one time me and Ryan were on holiday in Berlin. I was working in Berlin, and but we combined it with a family holiday, and some friends came with us as well. And so there's me and Ryan, this other guy who was also like on the same spectrum as us, like,
Hmm.
and we just sat there one evening, just like trying to figure out some insanely minuscule technical issue. It's like, why are you wasting your holiday? You've got on a bloody computer trying to figure out how to do this subdivision of whatever. And that's just the way some people are, I guess.
Mm.
Um,
I wanted to talk to you about the Intersymmetric program because I was actually up last night playing with it late,
all
and I
right.
kind of had to force myself to.
But was there anyone else in there with you?
Well, I didn't understand how it worked, so I sort of just discovered it. And then I was wondering because maybe you could just describe the program and then, yeah, we can
Okay.
talk about it.
So how that came about was lot COVID happened. My travel, before COVID, I was literally every day a different country. It was absolute chaos. COVID happened, and suddenly I'm locked down. I was caring for both my elderly parents at that time. Ryan had moved back home. So we're kind of like stuck in the house, no work, no travel. Um, and and then festivals started asking, oh, can you do this streaming show? Can you and for me, the idea of like sitting in my house performing over a stream to a bunch of people in their houses was not in any way a pleasant thing to do. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Mm.
that's not good. Um, and so it's like, what can we do that would be better than that? That would be more interesting? That would be like use this kind of context and situation as a way of developing some new things, new formats or whatever. Um, I mean, one thing that I'd been doing in all my practice leading up to COVID was constantly problem solving, constantly like you've got 2 days, you've got to create a new piece of work, you're in this space. And the only way you can do that is by let the environment do all the hard work, So it's like my practice was all about what's the environment telling me? What is it? I'm in this room. Oh yeah, there's that. What can I use to make my life easier? How do I solve these things? So really, I kind of dealt with COVID a bit like that. It was like the environment's putting a big question in front of me. What do we do? And then somehow, um, me and Ryan were like, maybe there's a way we can do like multi-channel stuff because streaming was stereo and it was bad quality. So it's like there's an issue with the channel count. There's an issue with the quality of the stream because it's coming. It's going over the internet. What about if we make a max patch and then we get this max patch? So if I change the parameter on my screen and I send a patch to whatever, a club in Berlin, the same parameter will move. So it's like synchronizing these two remote patches. And Cycling 74, who make Max, were really helpful. And uh, Joshua Kit Clayton gave us some tips on like look at these processes, and we managed to make this thing that functioned. So we did some experiments where we'd send a patch to a club or a venue or a gallery or whatever, and then we'd be able to change the parameters from here, and it, which I guess is similar to streaming, but it felt a little bit different.
Maybe so
Um,
you're saying you had a remote computer in a way
yeah,
instead of having
basically the
you
same
being in
max patch.
person, the computer. Yeah.
Yeah, the same max patch running on two computers, and they were
Mhm.
synchronized.
Mhm.
And then it was like, hang on, we could actually just send the max patch to whoever wants to be part of it, and they can all join in, and just and we can have this group thing. Do you know what I mean? So it's not just from me to the audience, but it's like suddenly the audience have got, they can download the patch and they can, and this could be a nice thing to do. So we did that and we did some experiments. Yeah, everybody, 50 odd people download a max patch, and then like 49 of them are like, how do I set up this? Why is this not working? What does that mean? How do I install this? What's that? So then we realized we've got to get it to work in a website. So it's like, how do we take the max patch and get that working in a browser? And so we met this guy James Bradbury, who was working just up the road in Huddersfield at that point, and we designed this drum machine. We didn't get any. At first, we applied for some Arts Council funding to make it because we had to pay James and da da da. But the Arts Council application was rejected. So we said, let's just do it. Let's just do what we can. So we made this drum machine interface. So a row of 16 buttons, and it loops around like like an 808 or something. But it's synchronized so that if I change a dial in my browser, it changes on everyone else's. And I think that was the first example of a synchronized multi-user drum machine that there is. There's lots of examples of multiplayer shooting games where you're all walk. Like there might be someone in like whatever, like Perth, and you're there in
Mm.
Rotherham, and you're both shooting up some bad guys in some shared virtual environment. But there's no shared synthesizers and it seemed to us a really obvious thing that should exist. So the advantages of it was that the data that was being sent between computers was tiny because it's just like parameter data. The sound is generated on your computer locally, so it means the sound is like high resolution, and the data transfer is like almost instant. And it just seemed like a really great um, response to what we were experiencing. So then we managed to do three of these things, and we started off with this drum machine that's quite traditional, 808 style interface. Then did one that was based on like Indian rhythmic systems, and then some other stuff. Yeah, so that was that, and it was
So the website you've got now is collaborative. Is that what you're saying? Because I wasn't sure if it was just on my computer and you had to join something to be
no, you
part of
just
it.
go to the website. Like if we did it now, and I launched the browser, and you went to the same thing, and I
Hmm.
said, "Look, I'm moving this button," you'd see it moving, and
And I'd also hear the same sound as you.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
because the sound's being produced on your computer, but the synthesis engine is the same. So I'm literally sending tiny amounts of data.
Mm.
So it's very very fast. I mean, I think we tested it once between Britain and various locations around the planet, and it was milliseconds, 2 or 3 milliseconds.
It's very cool. Like just to have that interaction. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it was nice. Also, what was interesting is the first one we did, the drum machine thing. We were going to do some performances with kids, so we got kids from all friends, kids basically. Um, and there was a chat thing on there. So at the side of the interface was like a window where you could type in messages and say, "Hello, man," and then all the parents were like, "Get rid of the chat interface because all the kids are doing are just like chatting to each other." And then we thought, yeah, let's take all that out. So the only way you have of feeling the other person's presence is this weird distance of like you see dials moving, but yet at the same time it's a really immediate thing because you're experiencing someone else joining you in a very real situation and making music together. And
It's like dancing in a way. You start to respond and build something that's.
yeah, I mean, music fundamentally is a collective activity. It's like,
Mm.
why do we have music? Why do humans have music? And it's because it's about group bonding and connection. That's what the function of music is, I think. Like I was reading some neuroscience paper the other day talking about neural synchrony, and if you make music collectively with people, you have this enhanced neural synchrony. I can't. I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know, but it was basically like the gist of it was participating in music together builds empathy and builds connections, and of course it does because that's what we can see that. Um,
I know it's not the same, but it makes me think of like the roots of the trees, and they say that all the roots of the trees are connected and have their own
yeah,
communication systems. That
yeah.
having maybe we're not physically connected, but there is ways to connect on a sort of higher space or orbit that
Yeah,
music does activate that.
yeah. I mean, I think it does actually. Yeah, I think music, like a friend of mine, Jan Hendrikse, who's a flute player, uh, started to say that music is a social technology, and I've kind of hijacked it, but I have to credit him because otherwise I'll get angry. So I think the idea of music being a social technology is a really good one, um, and also just things like even like rhythm and timekeeping. I think is something quite like I read somewhere that humans are the only animals we know of that are able to clap in time with one another. Like even chimps, who are very close to us, genetically speaking, can't can't clap in time. They can kind of pretend to clap in time, but it's literally like very fast reactions where that's not what we do when we clap in time. We're actually just like synchronizing
Counting,
together.
yeah.
So there's something really. The question I'm kind of preoccupied with is music something that's like uniquely human, and why do we have it, and what's its function, and how does that feed into how we perceive ourselves and the world, and how we perceive time, um, and what it is that makes humans what they are. um, and obviously I can't answer those questions. um,
Do you have a theory or philosophy of sound and how it functions? Maybe as a, I wonder if you have this mathematical or sculptural experience with sound.
well, I understand acoustics, the science of sound, and I understand psychoacoustics, um, and how we hear. And I have a way of understanding, I have a way of listening that I think, like when I think of music, I obviously don't think of pitch time relationships because that's an alien language to me. I don't, if you ask me to name a note or even play something on a piano keyboard, I'd struggle. But I tend to think of music in terms of shapes and geometrical relationships, and scale and density and texture and all these things. It's nothing particularly revolutionary. Lots of people think about music in that way, but that's how I kind of think about it. So
Mm.
I think I'm not synesthetic, but I feel like I almost am sometimes. Like I think I have a very um yeah, I don't literally see shapes, you know what I mean? But
Mm.
I kind of, if someone makes a certain sound, it's like that's how it appears in my uh, uh, cognitive uh, sort of cognition.
How old
Um,
were you when you started playing the synth?
so I'd say probably about 12 years old.
So you were at a very developing these senses. It's like
Yeah,
I played music. I did have music
yeah.
training for really the first nearly 20 years of my life, and I don't play instruments so
Hmm.
much now, but my understanding and listening of sound, it developed something in me that I think just plays out in everything that I do. And I
Yeah,
find that really interesting that at 12 years old playing the synth, you've experienced sound in a way that's not necessarily a theory, but a feeling of how you're relating to it is different. Whereas if you were an adult starting,
yeah.
um, it's like learning a language.
I'm sure it's not unique to me, but I know what sounds can do. Do you know what I mean? I
Mm.
think like a chef might know what ingredients can do. It's
Mm.
like
Mm.
like I know how to combine sounds. I know what will work, what won't. I know, and I think that's just come from like 40 odd years of like
Mm.
using synthesizers nearly every day. Um, but
And
again,
it's
that's
not
not
something you
unique.
can put on paper and teach someone. It's like your knowledge is.
Yeah, but also it's like a steel worker working with steel. You develop a sense of how the material functions. Like there's so my dad was a steel worker all his life. He's still alive. He's like 93 now, and he lives with us. And in lockdown, um, I had this. I got a steel fabricator in Sheffield to make I was building a workshop basically on the side of the house. So I got this steel frame made, and it arrived, and it was massive, so it was a pain in the ass to move. So basically, there was a hole missing. There needed to be a hole in the side of this frame, and I'd got my drills out and. And the drill bit glowing red and then snapping off another one. And I said to my dad, because he was like laughing at me, so he'd worked with steel all his life. Steel is what he knows, and he's got a very broad Yorkshire accent and a speech impediment because he's profoundly deaf. So I'll do an impression. He was like, "Mark, take one of my drills, go really slow and firm." So I took his drill. These are drills that he's had all his life.
Yeah.
You know, these aren't like crappy drill bits that you get from some cheapo DIY shop.
Mm.
So I get the drill straight through, like no effort.
That's so funny.
And then so this is like, what was this? This one must be like 2021. He lost his job in 1981. So
Mm.
that's 40 years earlier. He said to me, "I sharpened those drill bits before I left work." So he sharpened his drill bits. You know what? But what do you do if you're losing your job?
Yeah.
You're losing your workshop.
Yeah.
You're losing the machines that your working life revolves around. So he knows that he's leaving that workshop and he's never going to go back. What's important? Sharpen
Mm.
your tools. And
Yeah.
there's just something really profound about that. Um,
And it also is just reiterates this importance of intimacy with your craft and your skill and
yeah,
allowing that to develop because it's with you. It's a visceral relationship that
yeah,
you just understand.
you feel it. Yeah, yeah, like a musician feels their instrument.
Yeah, it's a privilege to be in that space, and it's really through time and work that
Mm,
that develops.
yeah, it's a nice way of understanding it, I think.
Mm. I wanted to ask you about collaborative practice because I feel a lot of, especially the last period of work, the performances have really been about bringing in other artists and I was thinking about a lot of the percussion work that you've done. Into Metamorphosis, you
Yeah. So
did
like,
the intro, and you've shared before that you did, environmental sounds, and then you brought in other instrumental performance to play the sound. So you've kind of
yeah,
always had your own theory, but it seems collaboration with others is really important
yeah, like
and necessary for how you make your work. It's not just a
increasingly, yeah.
one-off kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I came, I came from a collaborative background. So, like, the first professional work that I did was collaborative with Matt Steele, um, and then I built a solo career. And in many ways, that was a kind of economic decision. Like, I want to avoid working in academia, and I want to avoid, an office job or anything. So, like, I need to find a way of making enough money through doing quite unusual music to live. Um, And so I think in many ways it was a practical decision to do a lot of solo stuff. But then also, like, we're talking now about like 2007. So I'm if you bear in mind that my musical trajectory starts with this very sort of like incredibly narrow-minded attitude where I'm in this, and it's a narrow-minded attitude because it's a safe space that I'm occupying. And it's like this kind of suit of armor that becomes a straitjacket. And as I'm developing as an artist, I'm incredibly narrow-minded. And I remember, like, around 2005, if someone had said that, what you listen to, like, if a friend had said they'd listen to some sort of contemporary classical work, I would like be falling out with them. I'd be like, what? Why? This is betraying me. Do you know what I mean? That you've listened to, like, this kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? And that's the level of, like, pathology that I was on. But it's kind of like I needed that at the time. Do you know what I mean? I
Mm.
mean, I didn't need it then, but it
Focus.
was like it was a toxic hangover from an earlier version of me that was like literally like a matter of psychic survival. And then around 2010, um, basically people that I really respected, I realized they didn't have this problem. And this was a problem that I need to just not be so restrictive about, not be so narrow band. And so, but ironically, back in the mid 80s, I remember trying to buy jazz records or trying to buy contemporary classical records and just failing. Do you know what I mean? And it's because I didn't have, um, it would have been great if someone had said, "These are the jazz records you need to get. You should check out these guys, and this is you should listen." And this, but I that wasn't, had no way into that world. So, so
And you
yeah,
maybe
around.
weren't even open to it. You may not
I mean,
necessarily have
I
listened.
was I
Yeah.
was looking for that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
I was going into HMV and looking in the in the classical music section, seeing all these names that I'd some that I'd heard of and some that I hadn't, and thinking, well, that's got a nice cover. That must be good. I'll get that. And then you get it home and you spent all the money that you had that week on some piece of crap.
Mm.
And it's like, you stop doing that after a while. And that's really sad, I think. So,
Mm.
I think,
Yeah. You just needed the direction to
yeah,
something that was aligned. Yeah.
I needed someone older and wiser saying, like, yeah, check out this person, check out this person.
Mm.
And that I had no one there. So, I was just, anyway. So around 2010, I was kind of establishing a solo career and things were going well, and I was getting lots of shows and doing lots of work. And I really remember thinking quite clearly at that time, I've got to kind of get out of this narrow, I'm really so uh, deprived basically of like of a breadth of experience in music. So like I just started to learn. Basically, I just started to listen and learn, and and make a conscious effort to like meet people and talk to people and learn to love such a vast array of music, and then also I felt like at that time that I grew as a performer, where performance was always an alien thing to me, and I didn't understand it, and I didn't feel comfortable doing it, and suddenly I started to understand the kind of quite complex and subtle contract that the performer has with the audience, um, and that performance wasn't really about me having fun. Do you know what I mean? It was
Mm.
about me having a responsibility to go to a place that was uncomfortable in front of an audience, and like have the confidence to go to a place that was scary. Do you know what I mean? And when I say scary, I mean not like pressing play and knowing exactly, like using max patches and gradually finding the place where it all clicked on stage in front of an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And
Like an improvisation in a way,
yeah, I
or
mean, or just to search for the
mm-hmm.
point at which things click.
Mm-hmm.
The point at which. So just to backtrack, when I first started performing electronic music on a stage, it was like, let's go in the studio and practice, and we rehearse, and we know at 10 minutes I press this button, you press that button, I turn, so it wasn't entirely scored, but it was like we have a series of preset moves that we know we can go to. But the problem was it never sounded as good in the live context as it did in the studio. And I realized it's because in the studio we were just kind of moving around until we found what was right in that context. So I realized I had to start doing this on stage
Mm-hmm.
if I was, if I wanted it to work, if I wanted it not to be a catastrophe on stage, I had to get to the point where I was confident enough to put myself in a vulnerable position and gradually work to the point where it it seemed to feel good. And that's when I started to understand what performance was for me, and that it was, like I said, it wasn't about my fun. It was about me going with the audience somewhere and having a responsibility. And at the same time, I'm encountering all these other musics and starting to feel a really strong affinity with all these other things that, they're quite different traditions. And it just made sense to bring it together. So, I did some things where I was kind of like it was almost like I was the composer. I had it's a group, but it's really me saying you do the, and I might have worked like the intro piece, for example, with the percussion ensemble. A lot of those, all of that material came out of conversations and experiments with each of the players. But in reality, it was me making decisions and guiding the work. So it's kind of like that was my first step into that sort of world, and then getting to the point where I could just like go onto a stage with people and in the hope that it would work. And that it did, like a really great um thing, kind of moment happened when do you know this percussionist Mohammad Reza Mortazavi?
No.
He's a kind of Persian or Iranian guy living in Berlin, and he plays um, Iranian percussion. He's amazing. He's totally brilliant. And we'd got commissioned to do a piece in Dublin, so it was like we were headlining one of the nights. So when you're headlining, you want the audience to go home thinking the money was well spent. You want you have a responsibility in that role. And I said to the festival, like, well, me and Mohammed have never worked together, so we should have like a couple of days just to check, just to check each other where we're at and da da da. And so we arrived a couple of days early in Dublin, and we got to this practice room. And I said, look, I'll just play a few things that I'm thinking of. using, and you just see what you think. And I press play and did some stuff, and he just joined in. And like literally after about 2 minutes, we just looked at each other and said, "It's just working. We don't need to do anything else. Let's just go and hang out and drink tea and stuff." So literally, we went on stage. That's all we did. We just literally just connected for 2 minutes. Didn't talk about what we were going to do, and just went on stage and just let it happen. And it just, I think again, it's like you have to. I don't want to use kind of pseudo spiritual words, but it's almost like kind of it feels a bit spiritual. Do you know what I mean? It feels like an act of faith, sort of. I hate to. People have totally criticised me for being like for using those kinds of words, but it is like you kind of just take the safety net away and
And
see what.
trust it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
you
just
have to trust it. And
yeah,
I think also your Eastern philosophy and theory and those non-Western countries and your approach to music are actually quite similar
yeah,
in some ways, even though that may not have been where you came to it. But so you're kind of connecting with, in that situation, I just felt like you're connecting because you have the same value and appreciation and
yeah,
approach,
yeah.
even though they're very different sound outputs.
Yeah, I mean, I went to India and studied Indian music with some people and learned a lot. But also, we were talking earlier about Islam, and I also want to stress I'm an atheist. I don't believe I'm not Muslim. Um, but the kind of if you talk to someone who is a devout Muslim about like what their role is as a performer of music, and there's lots of like there's a massive amount of different musics in Islam. One thing you'll hear is that you as a performer you're acting as a conduit. It's not about you. You're not the superstar there. You need to remove your kind of ego and pride and just let the universe do
Mm.
its thing through you. And um, although I'm an atheist, that makes a lot of sense to me. It really feels like that's what I'm doing. It's not me as the originator of the work. I'm just a I'm just a small cog in a big system, and my kind of description of like creative process has been embedded in the environment, and also like this thing of like listening to the environment in term taking cues from the environment in terms of what to do. It's not far from um, a sort of Islamic perspective, I think. And and then and after this performance with Mohammed, I was like, don't you think it's like strange that we didn't talk? We just start. We're from very different musical traditions. We just turned up and it was great. It was a really good performance. It was like I was so chuffed with it. And Mohammed turned around and said, "Yeah, well, the universe gives it to us." And I was like, "Whoa, that's." It felt like that. Um,
I don't think that's necessarily religion. I think that's
yeah,
consciousness and being a human on this
yeah, yeah, and the
planet.
interconnectivity of things. It's
Yeah.
really problematic when people like me who are like hardcore atheists get triggered about that kind of language
Mm.
and don't see the more finer point that we're in a world of interconnections.
Mm.
Um,
And I think it's the people you choose to work with and finding those people. I don't think you choose to work with them, and maybe you can elaborate on this, but you choose to work with them because there's a common interest or something about them interests you. They're not just some random.
Usually because I really love their music. I mean,
Yeah.
and also when you're working with someone, there's a massive amount of trust between those two people. Just like, just you're going into an economic partnership for a start, or they could really sabotage your career, or something could go really wrong. Um, so I'm quite careful about who I work with, but the really essential thing is that I have to think their music is amazing.
Mm.
So like the people, I work a lot with Okkyung Lee, who's a cellist, and it's just performing with Okkyung is just like a total dream. It's like it's fantastic, and she just knows exactly what to do at any point. It's just um, so yeah, there are lots of people that are on my radar that are like I'd love to do stuff with. Um,
Is performance now something you're really, this is where you are, and
yeah,
you're wanting to continue that as opposed to solo
yeah. I mean,
albums or
I even had this
places?
conversation with Ryan, my son, who he does very similar stuff to me. We were up walking around the park yesterday, and we were kind of both ended up saying more or less the same thing. It's like we don't really understand why we'd want to play solo ever again. It's just like it just seems so. I mean, I'm sure I will do, but I'd much rather perform with someone. Um, and what I'm really into is like building up. So not just collaboration, but more like collective practice. So it's more like groups of people, and um, how can I kind of uh, what structures and systems can I put in place that enable people just to join in? That's kind of what I'm really interested in. Um,
Without any hierarchy and
yeah,
um
yeah, yeah. So like I said, the intro piece, there was
mm,
still that hierarchy there because I was a controller. Like literally, people were listening to pulses that I was making on my
mhm.
computer. So, um,
Maybe I was talking about hierarchy in terms of for example, the Intersymmetric program, anyone can join in,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and it's available to someone that's got no knowledge, and it's available to someone that's highly experienced.
yeah. And I think the way they'll engage with those things is quite different, but nonetheless, you can still engage with them.
Mm.
And I think just the way that people learn how to interact with those systems is, people find their own ways of like
Mm.
of what appeals to them and what doesn't appeal to them. And I think what's interesting is when you're working with systems that are sort of like, I think this is true of all music, that an engagement with the materials and the technologies and the systems also expands your aesthetic sort of tendencies. So I think when you engage with an instrument, you necessarily also enlarge your aesthetic preferences in response to what you're hearing. Well, whether that's a cello or a piano or I think that's what happens when people use things.
And then if you're inputting another person, then that's another level of response and engagement that
Yeah,
changes that dynamic. And
yeah,
I think it's really there's so much potential in that space.
yeah. I mean, I'd like to do more of that stuff, but it takes ages,
Sure. Yeah.
and there's a lot of it would be nice to like basically we just need grants to do that because we could monetize it. We could have put adverts on it, or like I think the first one, the drum machine one, I think when we first launched it there was like within the first few weeks there was several hundred users, and if that was YouTube then you could monetize that. But obviously I don't want to do anything like that. I want it to be free, and I want it to be outside the world of adverts and stuff. But it's like, how can you do that? So you know, I have to like earn money elsewhere to give me the time to spend 2 months in the studio developing that. And it's not just me; it's three of us. So it would be nice to have some grant funding, I guess.
Mm. And in a way, it's like a community project
It is
or
a
a community
community project.
service that you're offering.
It is, yeah, because it's about. It's like I said, me as an isolated kid back in the 80s. I'm reaching those kinds of kids, I think, who would just need alternatives, who would just, just don't feel adequately stimulated in the worlds that they're in. That there are people like that all over the place, and
And
it's
if they don't have
important
the
for me to.
resource, then they can go down violence, drugs,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
lose kind of
yeah,
a trajectory in their life.
yeah, completely. Yeah, I mean, if you're feeling alienated and angry, you're either going to get into art or some bad shit.
Mm. I wanted to ask you about listening and different processes of listening, both listening in your own work and responding to that, but also listening in performance and providing a space for people to listen to sound, and how different like applications of listening to sound functions. Does that make sense?
I'm trying to. I can't. What question are you asking?
Like there's a value of listening when you're making
Yeah.
work. It's really important that you can listen to the work that you're doing and respond to that. But then also listening as an experience, because I know you've done some circular systems of speakers and things like that. So you're creating an environment
Yeah,
to
yeah.
listen in.
So I think, like, I do works where there's like multi speaker works basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like, I just, I mean, basically, it comes down to making really nice sounds over lots of speakers. So one thing I don't do is imagine you got like 20 speakers, and a lot of people use things like surround sound technologies like Dolby Atmos or whatever, or another one is ambisonics, which ambisonics is a brilliant method for like um, positioning sound and controlling the direction of sound. But what I tend to do is if I got 20 speakers, I'll put 20 different sounds in each speaker to create these kind of spatially distributed composite, like almost like clouds of sound. So it's not like one thing I really don't like about a lot of spatial sound work is like, okay, so here's the kind of fly buzzing around, and it's like, yeah. And it seems to me like a really reductive way of thinking about sound and space. So I like to what I really like is to have a bunch of speakers and to put different synthetic layers in each speaker to create these kind of. It sounds a bit pretentious to call them sonic geometries, but that's what it kind of feels like to me. So there's the geometrical structure of the space and the sound, um, and it has a shape. It has a form, and I think just getting into the habit of because obviously not much is happening in those kinds of works. It's not like distractions. It's not like yeah, there's this thing going over here and then cars going like that. It's like you have to enter into quite a focused way of listening to to derive a sense of fulfillment from that, or any sense of pleasure. Um, and I think one thing I'm aware of is that you have to kind of take the audience to this sort of place beyond boredom. So I think it's like if you can get the audience beyond boredom, into this place where because what boredom is about distract. Boredom happens if you're not focused and you're distracted and you want in constant stimulation of like adverts and like YouTube shorts and all this kind of stuff. So boredom is a consequence of like not being able to focus. And once you can get the audience to focus, then it creates a special experience, I think. And I think there's so little headspace in urban environments and like contemporary living that I think you really need that chance to just like not be not be in this kind of toxic relationship with time basically.
Mm.
Like you need to just be able to like relinquish all that and just go into this focused state. And that's kind of what I do with try to do with the multi speaker works that I do. um and well, like for me, I can enter those kinds of environments and just, it's like being on a hillside. I can lay on a hillside for like 3 hours and not get bored
Mm. Mm.
because it's a beautiful hillside. So it's like, I mean, the
And
work
you're not
I
even
do,
looking at anything. It's just kind
yeah,
of
yeah, you're
this.
just there on the hillside. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, what. Um, so it's like if I can approach that sort of experience in a spatial sound environment, then that's I've done what I'm trying to do. Um,
Do you get
and
feedback from audience, or do you want to know if that's how they're experiencing
usually
works?
people tell me like I get a lot of people who don't like what I do. I get plenty of really bad feedback, um, and that's fine. If people don't get it and don't like it, that's up to them. But it really, but I regularly get feedback from people who are just like really really into some of the things I've done, and it it's really great when that happens. Because I don't do things in order to be liked.
Mm.
But if being liked is a byproduct of it, then it's really nice. It's really great when someone says that meant a lot to them, or um, yeah.
And do they function as a performance and experience, or do you think you could have the same impact if you put it on a vinyl?
I mean, working with vinyl is it's a very different. There's a whole different set of concerns, and because you've got a short amount of time, and you've got the history of the album format to deal with. Like making an album. The albums that I really love, they've got like peaks and troughs. They've got interludes. They've got long bits. They've got points of energy. And an album, was essentially once a collection of songs
Mm.
that take the listener through a journey that are really carefully thought out. Like, should I put this song here or this song there? So you're dealing with that history, I think, inevitably when you're making an album. So even if you're making something completely messed up and noisy, like for example, Second Annual Report by Throbbing Gristle, it's a brilliant album. In a very traditional way, it's a brilliant album because it's really hitting on what a kind of archetypal album structure is. I think, even though it's very unusual music. So I think you I don't feel I can ever escape from that history.
And you
You know,
can't just replicate and just record something and.
yeah, I mean, but that's my personal hang up, I guess, that that's what because I'm a vinyl. I was a vinyl collector. I've started buying for a long time. I had to stop buying vinyl because I would have just spent all my I had I would have as a kid literally all my money went on vinyl, and then for 20 some years I thought, right, I can't be buying so much vinyl, and now I'm buying records again. But I don't buy loads, but I'll buy like two a month or something, which is not too bad. Um, but I love listening to vinyl, and I love records so much. And it's like books. I love books. It's like I've got all these. I just love having books around. I love paper. I've not got a Kindle. I could never. Actually, I think Kindles are probably all right to read off, but there's just something reassuring about having paper.
I'm the same, and I really struggle to read online.
Yeah, yeah,
But what I find interesting you saying that is that you're very computer orientated now in making your work, which is
yeah, yeah,
in a way away from the very traditional um, like
yeah. But I've even
mechanisms.
look here. I've got I've got a Persian
Oh wow.
tambour from Tehran that I had made that I start to twang sometimes. Or here I've got an Arabic oud.
Uh
So I've got drums downstairs. I've got gongs and stuff. So I'm going to the dark side.
that's wonderful.
But
I want to learn to play the sitar. That's sort of
yeah,
but it
uh,
feels just very overwhelming.
yeah,
But I
yeah.
don't know
For
where to
me, the
start.
really amazing Indian instrument is the veena. I
I don't know
love
that.
the veena. It's kind of got like two big balls either end, and it's like ultra twangy instrument. So it's like
Hmm.
like I think it's quite an ancient instrument actually. I think it's like the Indian equivalent of the harpsichord or something. I think one
Hmm.
person once described it as. But yeah, I mean, Indian the way Indian instruments are used in terms of pitch is so beautiful because everything's so bendy and like articulated and like fluid and and again it's not about a a, a composition in classical Indian terms is not about these notes follow these notes follow these notes. It's about a set of possibilities.
Mm.
So it's a kind of it's a kind of thing that I'm trying to grapple with now about how to modulate possibilities. But actually, Indian classical music solved it a long, long time ago, or found a response to it. So yeah, I mean, it's an amazing tradition. But having said that, there's a lot of as a Westerner, it's really easy to kind of read Indian classical music in a certain way as this like highly spiritual, kind of transcendental, blissed out thing. But a lot of my Indian friends and colleagues often have to keep reminding me that actually, in many ways, Indian classical music is quite a problematic field in that it's quite exclusive. It's quite can be quite caste based. There's a lot of other Indian traditional musics that are kind of in danger of being lost. Um, so yeah, as a Westerner, it's quite easy to let my reductive, shallow reading of it uh,
Mm.
kind of be the source of my pleasure.
Yeah, and I mean it's so alluring, but to really understand it is another level of respect.
Yeah, I think there's a really great quote. I think it might have been Ravi Shankar who he was doing a show in New York or something, and he started making sound, and the audience were like, "Whoa!" And he said something like, "Well, I hope you enjoy the performance as much as you enjoyed the tuning up." And this audience just didn't have a clue. And
No.
as someone who didn't grow up in Indian classical music, when I go to India and sit in performances of Indian classical music, at some the audience are all like having a good time, and then at some point it's just like wow, and the audience go mental, And I'm like, what just happened? Do you know what I mean? Like, what did I just miss? And it's because I just don't have the, I love Indian classical music, but I don't have the knowledge that comes with being intimately connected with the structure of it and stuff. And so, yeah,
And that takes
it's,
time, and there's so many different music systems that I'd love to get to know and be intimate in that way, but
yeah,
you sort of have to
yeah,
just choose one for this lifetime and go
yeah.
for it.
I mean, I'm the opposite. I'm just like such a magpie and a jack of all trades. Like, I feel like a total imposter, but like I love jazz, for example, but I really have no clue about the history of jazz, or I just buy records and like them, and I'll never know the history of that the way that I know the history of 1980s electronic music. We did a thing recently where there's this program in Britain called Mastermind, and people have specialized
Mhm,
subjects,
mhm.
and so one time, I think it was a couple of years ago on holiday, and I was like, shit, what would I go on Mastermind as? And it's like, okay, 1980s electronic music. And then the whole family were like really finding out the most bizarrely obscure facts. And I was getting all of them. So that is the thing that I feel I would know. But even then, I've just got a particular path through all that there's massive gaps in my knowledge. Um, yeah.
What do you see doing you're working on now or focusing on? How or is it just a very multi-disciplined approach to
Well,
responding to what's needed?
I'm doing more work with like groups of people. So I'm doing a lot more, um, I guess you'd call it community work. But then on the other hand, I'm doing more work with like groups of musicians as well. So I just did this commission with this like contemporary classical ensemble in Britain called Explore Ensemble. And I just finished editing a record, which is the record. So we made this piece, and it was a lot of the things we've talked about in this discussion kind of came to were brought to bear on how I approached the making of this piece and the structure of it, and thinking about group dynamics and stuff like this, um, and so that we performed that for the first time. Actually, maybe like a year and a half ago, I think. But I just got in the studio with these guys and finished the record of it. So that should be out hopefully in the next few months. Um, I've actually got a hell of a lot of music that I've recorded that I need to edit. So lots and lots of electronic music that I've been performing for the past 10, 15 years that I've never released. And it's almost like it's too much now. And I'm kind of a bit overwhelmed by like, why did I leave it so long? So I've got a lot of stuff to edit. And then the new collaborations coming up. Like there's a there's a British pianist called Pat Thomas. I don't know if you've heard of Pat Thomas. Amazing performer. Um, so me and him are doing a thing at Sheffield University in a couple of months. So yeah, I just want to do more collaborative works, I guess. I want to do bits of all sorts. That's my problem. I can't just do one thing.
Do you seek people out for collaboration, or you tend to have people contacting you, or is it you've got
I
a
seek
project and
people
I
out,
need, yeah.
um, and there's so many amazing musicians and also it's a way of like I learn so much through collaboration, and I'm really lucky that the people I've collaborated with have all turned out to be good friends, and it's yeah. So I don't want to name names of people that are on my radar, but there's a few people on my radar that, crikey, I'd love to work with that person. Or yeah, but Yeah.
So let's finish up, and I'll ask you one more question.
Okay.
What do you celebrate
You mean
in life, or in
I
making work, in however you want to approach it?
what gives me cause for celebration, I guess, is that this is a really difficult question because I don't want to say anything stupid and shallow. Um, we talked about Rotherham and the problems it's got and had. I feel really privileged to be part of the. So I live right in the town centre, in the what would you call it, like hyper diverse part of town, and I feel really privileged to be part of that community. Um, I love it. I love walking down the street. I chat to everyone, and so. But what that doesn't answer your question. Crikey, I can't think of an answer.
Well, it's like what gives you joy, and I think that's a really lovely thing.
There's a few things. Meeting friends, cooking. I love cooking food. I will spend all day cooking food. I'm really good at cooking Indian food.
Oh,
Um, I love cooking food for people. I love having friends around. I love meeting friends. And the thing I love most is climbing up hills. So I love going out into wilderness and drinking tea on a hillside. That's so sad. This guy in Bergen, John Hegra, who's like this musician from Bergen, runs a tea shop, and he sends me really high class tea. Hang on, where's that? So he sent me these things. So these are all like really expensive teas, and like
what
little.
kind of? Obviously not English.
These are Chinese. I think this like some Chinese black tea. I think, and there's this pu'er tea, which is technically dark tea.
Hmm.
So what I'll do is I'll go out into the mountains. Well, they're not mountains, but just very big hills around here. We live near a national park,
Hmm.
so I'll take a water filter. I'll get some water from a waterfall. I'll get my stove going, and I'll make some tea, some really good tea.
Wow. How often do you do that?
Quite a lot. Like I try and get out there ideally once a week. I would have a day in the hills, um, and
So you're an
sometimes
atheist, but this is in a way very much a spiritual ritual practice, or
I think actually, you know what I think it is. I think it's looking into the distance. I think when you stand somewhere and you can see for 20 miles, I think it has an effect on your being. I think it's looking at things very long in the far distance. But yeah, I just love being. I love being in nature, and I mean it's weird because I lived in a city centre all my life, um, and uh, I'm a real sort of people person basically. But I just love I love being up mountains.
and do you go on your own?
No, I usually rope friends into it. So I have been on my own, but not much. Ryan also feels the same. So like we'll do really big walks together. We did one a couple of days ago. This so in the Peak District, the highest point is called Kinder Scout. It's this big plateau, and there are a few ways up it. Like there's probably dozens of ways up it, and we've done nearly all of them. But there's this one called Jagger's Clough that we'd not done. Clough means like a kind of valley with a stream in it. So what usually happens is you're walking along a stream and then it gets higher and higher and it ends up you're climbing up a waterfall. So it was quite a brutal walk. But yeah. It's nice.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me. I've
Yeah,
thoroughly
not to
enjoyed our
speak to you.
conversation,
Um, and
and I
yeah,
appreciate what you're doing.
thanks.
Thank you for listening to We Are Art People. You can listen to full episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and a limited edition series is broadcast with Soho Radio London. We are online at weareartpeople.com. Sign up to our newsletter for show updates and happenings, and please share with someone who may enjoy listening. See you next time.